back to the channel. My name is Crawford. This is Virginia's for Lowriders. This weekend, we got to get something done. Last weekend, we were knocking it out. We got all of this finally metal finished, painted, primed, all that. The exhaust is permanently hung with actual hangers. It's not going to go anywhere. The muffler was welded on. Airbags, air tank, compressors. We got the rear end painted, the 3-link painted. All kinds of big leaps in progress. And we need to do the same thing again this week. We need to get the rear end all the way attached. I got to put bushings in the 3-link. I need to make a brake line for the, or a couple brake lines for the rear end. There's a lot to do this week. As you can tell by this massive mess, I've been taking the interior apart, getting the wiring further along. Been making battery cables and getting everything finally loomed. Got the engine harness finally loomed and starting to get tucked into place. So that's the plan. We're going to get the rear end in, bushings. I'll show you all how I make ugly cables, fancy cables, and actually look nice. I'll go over pretty much everything we're doing. We're going to try and keep the rambling to a minimum this week, which I say every week when it kind of gets away from me and ADD takes the best of me. But yeah, that's what we're doing. We're going to chip away at it. More progress. Hopefully all of this looks relatively complete. I was hoping I could paint the tank. I actually went and bought paint for this. And that's another thing. I actually have some surprising news. I got the interior picked up from the interior guy. And it turned out pretty awesome. And I will add a clip of that. And I figured while I was blowing through that money, I actually went and bought the paint for the door jambs. So, weather permitting, it won't be this weekend. As the weather gets nicer, and as I chip away and actually get to the point where I'm ready to paint the door jambs, I can get all of the interior together. So, hopefully it starts to get warmer. It's supposed to be in the 50s all this week, which really isn't the best temperature, and I don't think my mini split would be very happy with me if I was to paint with solely that as my heat source. So yeah, if you've never been here before, go back and check out the other, I think we're up to like 35 or something videos. It's a lot. There is a pretty detailed step-by-step of everything that I've done to this truck so far, and we're going to continue to do it every single Sunday until it's done. Again, if you've never been here and you've seen the last ones, we're trying to make it to Mini Nats, which is about a month and a half away. And as you can see, we're way more than a month and a half away worth of work, because this is all weekend warrior type stuff. So I'm going to stop rambling. My buddy James is going to come over. We're going to knock out some bushings, and hopefully he can help me set this rear end under here, and we can get some stuff bolted to the truck. And it'll actually look like something was done again for a second week in a row. Because there for a while we were chipping away at it, but not nearly as exciting as big chunks of painted stuff. So I'm going to shut up and we're going to get to work. So thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe, do all the normal YouTube stuff. Check out the videos, and let's try and get something done. Alright, so James showed up and we've been out here for like an hour and a half trying to figure out how exactly we're going to do all of this. Put this soft line on. This will get tied into the frame. Hopefully it's long enough. It kind of doesn't look like it's going to be, and I might have to buy another one. But this is what we got for now, because I have to have clearance all the way across the top of this because of the C-notches, and this is really, really close to everything. Everything on this truck is extremely close. So I need to make a brake line from this guy to here, and from this guy all the way to the other side. So that's what we're going to attempt to knock out real quick while James is pantomiming my motions behind the camera.
Hey, Tim didn't show up tonight.
Yep, Tim didn't show, so we're sad. I don't know how we're going to make it through the night without him. So we're going to try to whip this up. I don't think I'm going to bore y'all with actually showing you how to do it, because there's a couple thousand of those videos on YouTube. But
Maybe there's somebody home that doesn't know how to make a brake line.
yeah, that's true. But we're gonna get this set in here. Again, it's gonna be kind of tricky. I'm gonna use, which I'm not a fan of self-tappers, but I'm gonna use some self-tappers, I believe, just because it's simpler and easier to attach some rubber isolated clamps to the back of these tabs and these tabs, because I don't really have anything else to attach the line to. I probably should have did this before I painted the rear end, but again, I'm not the brightest bulb, so get some of this beautiful bean footage here. Alright, we got the brake line on the rear, which is pretty uneventful. Now I'm making the small line to go from the soft guy to here. And then we're going to set the vent in wherever I put that really specific brass fitting that I only have one of. I got to find that, make a vent, screw that in, put Teflon on it and whatnot. And then run a hose somewhere, which I haven't figured that part out 100% yet, but we're getting there. Unless you want to walk around.
Good call putting the wheels on.
Oh yeah, I've been thinking about this all week.
So how are we going to lift it?
Alright, James helped me slide the rear end under here before he left. I figure I'll show you all the brake line before I get ahead of myself here. I bent it around the rear. The camera looks like it's really far away, but there's almost no gaps. Whatever. I put little rubber isolator clamps. Got the soft line hooked up. With these, it's not like most other things. It goes into a T and then splits off. This actually uses that wheel cylinder to distribute it to the other side. I'm not positive if that factory brake line is going to be long enough. It kind of seems, just looking at it right now, it's going to be too short for the lift that I get out of the truck. But if that's the case, it's not a big deal. That thing was like $9 online, so I'll probably find like a braided one or something. So now that that is pretty much buttoned up, everything but fluid, and doesn't have the drums and stuff on it yet, I'm going to put the bushings in. I'll probably call it a night after the bushings because it's already 12:30. So I got to throw all these in there real quick. And try not to scratch the paint. So I'll give a quick explanation of why the paint is so soft right now and why I'm okay with it being soft right now. So again, if you haven't seen last week's video, I'll try and do this without hurting myself. I used Magic tractor paint to paint the rear end and the link bars because that stuff is extremely tough when it finally sets up. I used their matte black. Their system is a 3-part system. One of the things that is optional, if you read their website, is the hardener. So the hardener, I didn't put it in there because I wanted that sheen, exact sheen that I have there, that matte, that semi-gloss. I didn't add the hardener to it, which according to them is okay, and I've done it on multiple things. The back of the cab wall is actually painted in the exact same stuff because I painted it before it left here when it didn't belong to me. And this does not scratch. This is tough. So I know that this will be alright, and it's just a temperature issue. But it actually says on the thing increases gloss, so that's why I avoided it. So hopefully it starts to get warmer. It's 60 to something degrees in here with the mini split, but yeah, we're getting off track here. The paint will harden. It's still kind of soft. I painted it 5 days ago, so I have to be extremely careful with it when we're pounding the bushings in or squeezing them in with the vise or however I go about getting them in. Another thing I need to do is cut down the bolts because I wasn't able to find the exact length bolt that I needed to fit my tabs, or my width of my tabs. So I have a few that are long, a few that are kind of exactly-ish right. So I need to get those, cut them down, taper the edges, bushings, blah, 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 rambling. We'll get back to work. Alright, before I show y'all the interior stuff, I don't know what point I'm going to be adding this to the video, but before I show you, I went in there, I told the man I didn't want a school bus seat. I didn't want just a flat piece of vinyl. And I didn't want it to be exactly stock. I wanted something that just basically showed 80s, early 90s. Gave him a general idea and told him just to go with it, and whatever he came up with, he came up with. And I would say that he definitely did exactly what I was asking for. I would say it's very reminiscent of, I think the fabric that I picked out is almost exactly like late 80s, early 90s Chevrolets. I know I've owned pickup trucks with the same material in it. So they turned out pretty awesome. The camera is picking up the kind of like, I know it's on velvet, like whatever you would call this, a little weird so it looks blotchy, but you get the idea. Reminds me of early, I know that like I had a C1500 or 2500, whatever it was, that had an interior almost exactly like this. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And the door panels, they turned out pretty good too. I am definitely happy. Let me see. Definitely happy with the results of this. I'll try to get some better shots in the light, especially when it gets closer time to putting them in. But I figured I'd give you all a little preview of what or how they came out. But I am very happy with the results. I think this is going to fit the look of the truck extremely well. I think it's a better, more durable material than I don't know what that factory seat was made out of. It looked like the same material they make tablecloths out of or something. But this portion of the video is Monday night, so I don't know what point it's going to get thrown in there. Yeah, I'm going to go wrap this up, put it in my spare room, and hopefully it doesn't get ruined sitting in there for the next couple weeks. And today I picked up paint finally. I already had some of the supplies, and it still cost me $500 and some odd for just 3 quarts of paint, the hardener, and primer. So hopefully this truck is going to turn out good, because I've been pretty good about putting money into it up until now, and we're really putting money into it now. At least for trying to be a cheap project, we're going a couple steps ahead of cheap now. So yeah, I'm gonna go inside and pass out, and y'all continue whatever day this ends up getting posted. All right, next day, got the bushings in the bars. I need to change out this Heim because I just used it for mock-up for welding and whatnot. So I need to change that out because it's probably extremely heat damaged. I went through and figured out all my bolts and which ones I'm going to use. So what I was talking about last night, these are just a little long to where when the nut's on there, there's going to be another inch or so hanging out. I want to cut them down just a little bit. I'm going to cut them with the bandsaw to keep the heat out of them. It's not going to affect the strength of the bolt or anything. It's pretty straightforward. Cut them, taper them, throw a little paint on the end, and I'll try to set the axle. We're going to pull a page out of the pick-apart book, stack bare rims to try to get the height of the axle a little bit more in range. Oh, one thing I didn't talk about last night. So whenever I welded this rear, the factory vent is here. There's a little tiny cap thing that sits on the side of the rear end. I drilled the axle tube and added this small 90-degree brass fitting. I think what I want to do is run a rubber hose, kind of like I see it on mostly GMs. Everybody has a vent of some sort. The GM style hose that just goes up and it's tied to the frame somewhere. That way it can breathe. If for whatever reason they expand it enough for the stuff to travel through the hose, it doesn't leak on the ground. You don't lose any fluid. It goes back in the rear end when it's done expanding. So we're going to start by cutting the bolts and then very carefully, hopefully without scratching anything, put the bars on, which I doubt that's going to work out smoothly because again, that paint is still soft. Figured I'd explain what I meant with the length of the bolt not being exactly what I wanted. So to get the exact length of bolt that would work in this case, I would be running a shorter bolt, but in the bolts that I get through work that are one of our distributors that I buy from, the way that their bolts are set up, the shorter bolt, the threads would start further back, probably about to here. So if I went with the shorter bolt, the thread would be resting on the tab. I was trying to avoid that. The way that it is now, the tab will be right on the actual collar of the bolt and not be touching the thread at all. The only part that the thread protrudes through the tab. That's what I'm trying to say. Without touching the tab. Alright, they're cut. The nut's still thread on there, perfectly fine. So now, need to get the rear end up. It's going to be tricky without scratching anything. This whole process is going to be tricky without scratching anything. Well, so far, the hose looks like it might actually work. If I can actually get this in there and get it started, maybe. We're actually starting to look like something here. I need to get 4 more lock nuts, 5 more lock nuts, because, oh, actually I got one right there. Need to either find the ones that I originally purchased, but who knows where those went in the garage, or pick some more up. That's not really a big deal yet. The 4-link needs to be fine-tuned because it's, I don't know, I had everything apart again, and I need to adjust stuff and measure it all out. But again, kind of the paint's holding me back on that, so I think we're going to move on to other things. So one of the things that James and I were talking about last night, which ended up taking up a good portion of time, was trying to figure out airline routing. So a couple options here. You could run it somewhere in this range, which is kind of looking like the deal. Only thing is, I don't like that bend. I do have some 90-degree fittings that I could put here to take it away from that harsh bend. Other options are I can't really run it on top of the notch because of the body drop. I don't think I'm going to have any room up here at all. I really don't want to run it on the outside of the frame rail. I know that some guys do that. I just have a fear of everything potentially getting ripped off with the tire or picking up something on the side of the road. So I think that's probably the only route I can go, is to sneak it in behind the notch and attach it that way. The other thing that I need to figure out is the power wire. So I'll have the inlet coming through here on both sides and the airbag line coming in here from both sides. So it's going to be kind of crowded in here, and I really don't have that much room to work with anyway. And I also need, this is just a scrap piece of wire, I also need to run the power wire from the battery that's going to be located in this area to the front. I got a lot to figure out. So I've been racking my brain trying to figure out exactly how I want to do all of this. But we got some pretty good progress so far. Getting everything bolted back in doesn't seem like a whole lot done, but just having it set in place is a pretty huge deal. I got the soft line hooked up. The bags won't extend much further than what they're just drooped at right now. So this might actually be okay because there's another couple inches of play in that. Need to make a brake line from here to this little union thing. Need to take off these nasty crunchy lines, get some new ones on there. Need to make a line from here to the front. It's like a lot of little details. The table is actually running out of stuff to be piled on it. So again, got on Amazon, found some stuff. Got some little rubber boots. Got some single point power connections. Some double point power connections, or junction blocks, whatever you want to call them. And this is the idea that I came up with for sending power through the firewall. I'll use the black one just because it'll look nicer. So my idea behind this, because I'm going to be running 2-watt from the battery all the way into the cab, and from in the cab to the engine. So the alternator will be 2-watt, the starter will be 2-watt, everything will be 2-watt. There will be eventually a stereo in here. So I'll probably be building, I have some 8s I'll probably build a box with, or 4. So there needs to be power throughout the whole truck. So I need to try to think ahead while I'm building this, so that way I don't have to go back and remove something and then add to it and yada yada yada. So my idea here, I made this cable, so this will go to the alternator. I want to run that along through here. I want to put this guy through the firewall. Well, my camera died while I was in the middle of talking, and that was like 3 hours ago. I'm back out in the garage now. And what I was trying to say was I have these. I'm going to drill a hole through the firewall, pass this bulkhead fitting through the firewall. I'll have my cables come in from this side, connect to power. On the back side, same thing. It'll go from this to a junction block in the cab, from that junction block to the battery, and feeding off of that junction block will be the power for the subs, power for the little fuse block that's going to go in the inner fender. Everything will just feed off of that main power. So the thing that I rack my brain over and over on, so the whole reason behind me wanting to put that bulkhead up there and just having my cables feed into it, and it'll have its little boot thing on the end and nothing can harm it, or it's not going to get like messed up in any way. So for instance, I have this single hole in the cab right here. Coming off of the engine from the back, this cable is going to be coming in the firewall like this. This cable's not, it's pretty big stuff. It's not exactly flexible to the point where it can make some crazy S-curve, and no matter what you do, it's a chafe point. There's no way to get around the chafe point. So I figured if I was to come off of the block and just have this connected to this, and I can remove and service just the starter, just the alternator, whatever I need to do. I think this will be a better solution. So this is probably what we're going to do next. I just got to figure out a place that I'm happy with seeing, basically. So probably somewhere in here. It'll be kind of tucked out of the way. And there's plenty of room behind this on the firewall. So I'm going to drill that hole, set this in here, and see if we can get some of this stuff wired up. So I initially made these without having the little bulkhead actually here, because I was impatient. I was trying to get something done ahead of time, but it didn't really work out. So these are, both of the ones that I made are too long, and they'll get used somewhere else, I guarantee it. So I need to make another one, probably about this length. I'm thinking I'm going to use this little flat spot right here to mount that. So I need to make another one for the alternator and another one for the starter, so that gives me a chance to show y'all how I make them, which is pretty straightforward and pretty cost effective, I guess. It's a cool looking for not a lot of money. All right, so I figured out the lengths that these actually need to be, and I believe that these are still going to work inside the cab and potentially at the battery in the lengths that they already are. So I'm going to show you the way that I've been making cables for a very, very long time. I've built a lot of lowriders and I've made a lot of cables this way, and I haven't had any of them fail. So I'm confident in telling that this is an easy, somewhat affordable way of doing this. So get on Marketplace, try to find you some welding cable for a decent price. You can buy it brand new. A lot of the time I just buy it used. This cable that I have has a bunch of cuts in it, and the guy that owned it wasn't comfortable with continuing to use it wrapped in electrical tape. So he sold it to me pretty cheap. So I got it for like, let's just say 75 cents a foot, compared to if I went to buy it new, 2 something a foot. So you need to keep in mind, if you're making a direct length cable, keep in mind that these ends add over an inch of length to the end of your finished cable. So in this scenario, I want my end to stop at the end of this blue tape. So I'm actually going to be using the bent portion. Let's just say I know that I'm going to be using an entire fitting there, and I want this one to end here, so I would cut it below the crimp, or before the crimp. So you can get these cable cutters pretty cheap offline for less than 20 bucks. These ones are channel locks, but I also have the Milwaukee versions. They're all about $20. You can cut and you can strip with these all in one, so you don't need to own multiple tools to do that job, because this stuff is really big compared to a normal car wiring, like a 16 gauge. I don't recommend running lengths of power like this with any kind of car audio cable, because a lot of cheap car audio cable is copper clad aluminum and it corrodes, and it's pretty terrible. It's really, really cheap and it's tempting. But fight the temptation. Try to find some welding cable or some legit actual battery cable. Battery cable usually has thicker strands, but again, this is high amperage cable. It can handle it. It's a little bit more flexible than a actual battery cable, which I don't have any in here to show, but this is definitely what I'd recommend. So what I normally do to spruce this up a little bit, not the right one, I also get on Amazon, get you a cheap roll of heat shrink with the glue in it, which I probably should have waited to strip those ends, but it'll be alright. This is a little added protection. It also covers up the ugliness if you don't like the color. What I will do is a full strip of heat shrink over top of the main thing. Changes the color of it, adds some protection because that stuff's pretty stout. And then I'll get on Amazon again, where I order this stuff by rolls. It's extremely cheap. Like this Chinese finger trap stuff is $10 a roll. This stuff is probably $10 or $15 a roll. And it goes a really long way. Very, very long way. So what I'll do, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's put the ends on real quick. I will show you the way that I've been doing this portion of it for a long time. And I haven't, like I said, I've never had one of these fail. Get all your wires in here. Bring it in a little closer. So I don't own one of those crimping tools. I have them at work. We have the big bolt cutter style. We have the one you smack with a hammer. I've used all of them. Still, this is the method that I go back. So when stripping it, you need to make sure that the cable is right before that stops. Get all your little strands in there. I take a very stout, cheap screwdriver with a nice number 3, number 2 head on there. I think this is a 2. Place it sort of at the beginning, right after the crimp. So I'll do my first one, which is really, really set in there. I'll follow that up with another one. Shape it a little bit. And that is an extremely tight crimp. Those wires are actually kind of curled in there in this shape here. Go ahead and do the other side. When you're doing this, take into account this will be on the firewall, this will be on the starter, so they're kind of opposing. So this one needs to be opposite. Hammering that edge isn't necessary. I just do it because it looks better once everything is heat shrunk and finished. So this will sit in there. Firewall, starter, this will get bent to a 90, just like how I have this, so it actually fits on the starter. But I will take the Chinese finger trap stuff, burn my end. So what I've been doing with this Chinese finger trap stuff is I get it set on there. I'll take the torch, melt the edge of it a little bit, let it cool. Once it cools, you can go in and pick off the little bubbles. And I will follow that up with 2 more strips of this. Cut to the same length. So with me rambling, that took 10 minutes, but you get a much more, I don't know if it's quite professional, but a much better looking cable overall. Something that doesn't look like you made it in your garage versus, I don't know, just trying to crudely crimp on a copper end to a piece of wire and leaving it bare. This way, everything's completely sealed up. I leave a little bit of a gap between everything. This stuff has glue in it. There is, you can actually, well, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but you can actually see the glue melting into the edges of everything. So this is sealed from the elements. It looks fancy, sorta. So what I'm gonna do is whip up the second one and we'll see if we can get the alternator and the starter wired into that bulkhead fitting, and we'll go from there. Well, I tried to record it, but couldn't really see with my hands in the way. But this is the harness installed on the alternator. I have to come up with something to cover that guy up with. Those little boot things I bought are not the right size, so I'll have to figure that part out later. Here is a little lug thing. Everything is away from the block. I can get my fingers in around everything. Nothing's going to chafe. I was going to run this kind of up and tie it onto one of these bolts, but I figured it made more sense just to avoid everything and have everything kind of not really floating in place, but kind of between this cable and this cable being tied together and the other harness going to here being tied to it. Everything kind of just floats in place. And from the top, all you see is that one cable going back. This needs to be finished. I still have to put ends on this for the oil pressure and water temperature. As far as the inside, I'm still trying to figure this out. Not 100% sure how I want to finish this off, but there's tons of room around the lug. I have a whole bunch of random distribution blocks and whatnot that I can use to mount in wherever. I have the 2-prong ones, single-prong ones, 4-prong ones. I just need to come up with something that is clean, easily accessible to where when I'm driving this thing I can fix it on the side of the road if anything was to happen. I have little fuse blocks that I can put in, which I plan on putting a fuse between this side of the lug and the cab. That way, if anything was to chafe and arc through here, I would lose alternator, but it would just pop the fuse and I wouldn't have to worry about power arcing or anything like that. So, I think that's pretty good for tonight. I mean, a lot of sitting out here and pondering tonight. A lot of hours went by of me just staring at it and trying to figure out what I'm going to do. But the rear end is in today and bolted up, and the alternator and all that's wired up. Tomorrow, I think I'm going to make this brake line. I have that other little union thing here. I'm going to mount that to the frame rail. That way I can get the brake line ran from that side over to here to this guy, and then a line underneath the cab, and then the line to the rear end. That way all of the brake lines will be made. I'm going to go ahead and remove this stuff. I need to pull the sending unit out of that tank and maybe just get this corner primed and this thing scuffed for the next nice day, and I'll just paint it. Yeah, I'm tired. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I went inside at like 1:30 last night. So I'm going to go inside and pass out, and we'll try and see what we can knock out in the morning. Well, it's Sunday, and I didn't get any work done. I came out here and I put the wheels on just to get some instant gratification of what we're going to look at here. And pretty happy with the progress we've made so far this weekend. But my buddy James and I went to a couple counties away to look at new cars. And then we proceeded to spend the entire day at the dealership. So I didn't get any work done today. And interest rates are ridiculous right now. It's crazy. Doesn't even make any sense how wild that stuff is. But I'm not going to get into all that. I believe I haven't finished editing yet, but I believe the video is probably somewhere in line with the length of videos I normally put out. So it's not a total loss. Hopefully we can get back on it tomorrow after work and keep chipping away at this thing. The goal for next week will be getting all of the cab wiring done. All of those junction blocks and everything mounted with fuses and everything in there wired up. One thing I did decide to do for now is to remove the heater core. I've been looking at aftermarket heater core boxes online. You can get them for a couple $100, and they're much more compact than, I don't even know what I did with it, than the big giant fan that this thing comes with. So I'll be able to reroute all of the small plastic plumbing enough to at least have some face heat, some feet heat, and some defrost. It might not be plumbed exactly factory, but I think it'll fit in the dashboard better because the wheel tubs, that's the whole reason. The wheel tubs are literally cutting into half of where the heater box was, so it's not working out. So I'm going to try and make up my mind on one of those soon so we can maybe make a video on that. If any of y'all have the same issues, I'll try to go through the problematic pain in the butt that it is to install one of those so y'all know what you're going to get yourselves into. So yeah, hopefully this week it gets warmer. We can get some wiring done. Maybe we can get the fuel tank done and get that in. Start getting that plumbed, and like progress can continue to go on. There's some green left. I found green. I hate to say it, but there's actually green. The drive shaft, if you watched a couple of videos ago, it's painted like a green barber pole for some reason. So that's another thing I need to do is sand that down. But we're just going to stop rambling. Hopefully I'll come back next Sunday, check it out, and do all the normal YouTube stuff. Don't forget to subscribe, like, all that stuff. Comment, let me know what you think. Maybe you have some ideas for the airlines that I haven't thought of yet, or wiring. One thing I did think about, which is kind of backing up in progress, but it would probably solve most of my issues, was to cut a hole in here and a hole in here and put a piece of tubing in there and weld that back together. But I haven't convinced myself that I want to grind that brand new bedliner stuff off. So let me know what you think. Good idea, bad idea? I don't know. So yeah, I'm going to stop rambling. I will see y'all next Sunday.